Hello, this is Ukra with Lyudmila Nemiria, and we continue our broadcasting from Kiev. Today, our special guest is Edward Lucas. He is a very famous British journalist and columnist. Now, he is a non-resident senior fellow and senior advisor at the Center for European Policy Analysis. And he is a columnist at the Times, and he was a senior editor in the Economist, very famous journal. And he was a correspondent, the Independent. Mr. Lucas, hello, and thank you so much to be with us today.
It's an honor to be on your show.
Thank you. Mr. Lucas, I remember how in March 2021, in an interview, you told me that West underestimated the threat from Russia. It was just March 2021. When nobody think about this huge invasion, but you was right and more than right. Now you have two very brilliant articles. One of them is in the Time, and the main idea of these articles are that Putin is already at the war with NATO, and it will be soon get worse. And the next one is Europe is under attack. What could be the answer? How it's happened? How it could be possible that in 3 years Putin do what he do?
Well, first of all, I would like to say that the West has underestimated Russia, not just since 2021, not just since 2014 and the seizure of Crimea, not just since 2008 and the war in Georgia, but actually since the 1990s. There's been a fundamental failure to understand that we are dealing with an imperialist Russia and a regime that cannot be at peace with itself or with its own people and with its neighbors, but is always trying to exert influence over those neighbors, sometimes with economic pressure, sometimes with information pressure, sometimes with military pressure, sometimes all of the above. And the West has still not fully understood that we face an existential struggle with the Kremlin, with the Russian regime, and we really have two choices. We can fight alongside Ukraine while Ukraine is still intact as a country, as a strong ally, or we can wait until Ukraine is beaten, and then we have to fight Russia on our own. Those are the only two choices we have. We don't have another one. And I'm afraid that message has yet to get through in many Western countries.
Mr. Lucas, you put the brilliant question in your article, Europe is under attack, what could be the answer? Let's speak about possible answer and why you say that even now Europe is under attack. It is very important because very often we hear that it's just a war between, Russia and Ukraine, but you say more broadly, more existentially.
It's clear that Europe is under attack. We see a wave of Russian sabotage, arson, beating and intimidation, sometimes murder, cyber attacks, electronic warfare, intrusions into airspace, political interference. The list goes on and on. And this is happening all over Europe, from Norway in the north to Romania in the south and to many other countries. And Europe does not have an answer to this. We have, on paper, a military answer to a military attack on NATO. And if the Russians would be kind enough to be very convenient and considerate and would announce that in 2 weeks' time they intend to attack Lithuania, that would give us plenty of time to prepare, and we would probably do quite well in repelling that attack. But Russia doesn't play by our rules, doesn't play by any rules except its own. So Russia is already attacking us, and it's creating a new normal. a new normal in which it's okay to put fire bombs into the German postal system, which could have easily brought down an aircraft, to do all these things, sending missiles and drones into our airspace. And we in Europe don't have a response to this. We don't have a response by denial, making it so difficult that Russia can't do this. And we don't have a response of deterrence by punishment, saying, if you do this, we will do something to you that really hurts you, and then you won't do it again. So, yes, war is already underway in Europe, and Russia is winning that war.
If you look for the strategy of West, we understand that there are many countries which have its own interests in this, big, complicated situation. What do you think? Is it possible to have one common strategy for Russia, or it is impossible right now, especially if we take into account the situation with election in the United States?
Well, Europe's always had different views on this, and I'm old enough to remember the Cold War. I remember the time when the transatlantic alliance came under tremendous stress because of Vietnam. I remember the strong neutralist tides that were running in Germany and the so-called peace movement. I remember countries like Denmark refusing to do anything for territorial defense. I remember the French pulling out of the NATO command structure. So problems are nothing new. But I think that NATO AP 32 is finding it very difficult to establish consensus among the European allies, chiefly because of Hungary, which is now taking a very destructive pro-Russian stance, but also because there's a fundamental loss of confidence in the United States. We no longer trust America the way we used to, because we've seen that our security, your security in Ukraine, becomes a kind of hostage to internal political fights in America, with Speaker Mike Johnson holding up for 6 months vital votes on money for Ukraine, votes which the American people were supporting. But we see that this the breakdown in the previous bipartisan consensus in favor of transatlantic security is really scary for us. And so we are now moving into a post-Atlantic, post-American age in European security, but we're not ready for it. And this is very difficult.
Mr. Lucas, in your article, you say that even Baltic country could be attacked by Russia. You say that this Baltic country looks like sitting duck. Does it mean that the NATO umbrella now is not so strong?
Well, I think it's not just the Baltic countries. The Finns, the Norwegians, and the Poles are all worried about this, and the Romanians as well. And we see that there are some serious problems in the NATO capabilities. We have on paper very good plans, but will the plans work in practice? We don't yet have the stockpiles of ammunition that we need, and we know from the war in Ukraine how extremely fast you get through ammunition and barrels for guns once fighting really starts. We are short of the precision munitions, these long-range weapons. We're short of air defenses. And we place an enormous reliance on the United States, that the Europeans will fight for the first few days of the war, and after that, the Americans will come and rescue us. Well, that's a big bet these days. And so I think everyone is now looking to see how they can fill these gaps themselves. So the Estonians, for example, are buying lots of long-range smart munitions for their artillery. The Finns are buying the F-35 fighter. They already have the JASM long-range missile. So all over Europe, you see people trying to make their defenses much more robust. But it's not enough, because Russia will be ready in the latest by the end of the decade, maybe even earlier, for another fight, for another war. And NATO without America, the European part of NATO, cannot be ready in that time frame. Even if we started yesterday, we wouldn't be ready. It's just too much stuff to make, too many people to train, too many exercises we need to have to get ready. So yeah, our infrastructure is all wrong. We can't do military mobility. We can't move people around. So we are really screwed in Europe, and we are particularly screwed if Russia wins in Ukraine. And that's why it is so important that European countries really help Ukraine now, particularly with money, because you in Ukraine can make the stuff you need. You don't need it from us. But your defense industry is working at less than half capacity because you don't have the money. So we just need to start writing some checks and then sending some air defenses and helping you withstand the Russian offensive and do real damage to the Russian war machine. This is the best possible investment for us. And if we don't make it, we face a security catastrophe.
You wrote that even Britain is unable to field a single warfighting division abroad and is pitifully short at air defense at home. It is a little bit unexpected for us because some years ago we were seeing that such countries like Britain, France, Germany, they have a very strong armies, they're ready for everything. But it was a little bit surprised that it's not so good history.
Well, I'm afraid that Britain has a long history of over-promising and under-delivering to NATO. And NATO's fed up with this, and the Americans are fed up with it, and the Americans have complained publicly about it, that we don't actually have the ability to field a full warfighting division because our army is under strength. We can't get people to join the army, and we can't get people to stay in the army once they've joined. We particularly can't get people with the skills, the scarce skills of electrical and mechanical engineering that one needs in a modern army. So our army is really under strength, and all the stuff that goes in behind the army is under strength as well. We do have some very good air defences, but they are on our modern ships. And so if those ships are in home waters, they will defend London very well, at least for the first few days of the war. We have excellent air defences on our Type 45 destroyers. But that's pretty much it. We don't have the sort of short-range air defences that one would need if one was going to withstand a long war with lots of Russian attacks. And so we've placed all our bets over the last many years that we wouldn't be fighting a peer adversary, a country as technologically advanced as we are. We placed our bets on the idea that we would be facing expeditionary warfare against basically terrorists, Taliban, Al-Qaeda, people like that. And that, unfortunately, was a bad mistake.
If we say about the answer from the West for Russia, let's think that Russia is now not alone, because we see the strong connection between Russia, Iran, China, North Korea. And it seems from Kiev that this connection becomes stronger and stronger. What do you think? Is West is ready to react enough for this common position of Russia, Iran, North Korea, and of course China?
Well, the adversary countries are working very closely together. I would not say that they are actually an alliance because I don't think they have deep shared values or institutions. There's no counterpart to the Atlantic Charter, which is the founding document of NATO. There's nothing like the North Atlantic Council in terms of decision making. They don't have the decades, indeed centuries in some cases, of shared endeavour which underpin Western alliances. So it's more transactional, but they all share an interest in humiliating the West, and so they're working on that. They know that if Russia wins in Ukraine, then North Korea is more powerful against South Korea, and they know that China has a better chance of dealing with Taiwan, and Iran has a better chance of standing up against Israel. They know that they have a better chance of getting what they want in African and Latin American countries. So they have a strong shared interest in this. And yes, they are helping Russia. And no, the West does not have an answer to this at the moment. We are unwilling to see these adversary states all in the same category. So we see North Korea as a faraway problem if we're in Europe. Well, not anymore. North Korean troops are fighting right now in Ukraine, just a day's drive away from the European Union frontier. China is not just a business partner, it has become the senior partner in the alliance or the partnership with Russia. And Iran is supplying enormous numbers of missiles to the Russians, which are doing terrible damage to Ukraine, or drones, I should say, more than missiles. So all this is happening under our noses, but we are unwilling to wake up and realize it.
You wrote in your article that, for example, Chinese have exercises in Belarus, directly near the borders of European Union. It is the next one, which is very important as well, as I think.
Yes, I mean, I think the Chinese presence in Belarus is easy to exaggerate. They've put a bit of money into an industrial park, but it hasn't really made any great difference. And the Lukashenko regime enjoys flirting with Beijing to show that it has options, as well as its close ties to Russia. But I think that fundamentally China is the big winner of the war, because China has now made Russia into a kind of client state, which is a really good outcome. They've weakened the war's weakened Western credibility, so people are less confident that the West or the Americans will defend Taiwan, because they've seen that the efforts to defend Ukraine were not exactly decisive. In the global South, Ukraine has not really got its message across, and many countries in the global South see Ukraine as a sort of NATO project and Russia as the anti-imperialist power, and also more sympathetic to China. So I think China has done very well out of this war. It hasn't had to spend very much, and it's managed to make some considerable gains.
Mr. Lucas, do you think that the support of Ukraine from the Western countries depends on the main questions, with the main question of what to do with Russia?
Yes, I think fundamentally all this stems from the point that we do not have a Russia strategy. We don't have a theory of victory, of how does Ukraine win and what do we need to do to make that happen. We just have this sort of platitude that we will support Ukraine as long as it takes, without saying what it is. But deeper than that is we don't have a theory of Russian defeat. We don't know what a defeated Russia would look like. We don't know what we want to achieve in terms of a defeated Russia. We don't know how we would deal with a defeated Russia. And that is the, I think, underlying problem. It's been our problem since 1991. We have a nice, naive idea that Russia one day will be a big, friendly trading partner, more or less democratic sort of West, and we'll be able to get on selling them shampoo and soap and things, and make stuff there cheaply and dig stuff out of the ground that we need, and that there'll be a sort of comfortable Russia one day. But there isn't going to be a comfortable Russia. Russia doesn't want to be comfortable for the West. But we can't seem to think our way into the real world, where we're dealing with an uncomfortable Russia, permanently uncomfortable, threatening Russia. And we need a deep, well-organized, well-implemented strategy for dealing with that, and we don't have it.
I remember that many Western experts say that it is important to prevent the close connection of Russia with China, because it is very important for future security. And it just happened. And what else? What next?
Well, there are people in America who say that we've got this all wrong. We should be friends with Russia forget Ukraine, forget Eastern Europe, forget all of Europe. It doesn't really help. What the United States really needs is to get Russia on its side against China. And the most prominent advocate of that viewpoint is probably Tom Graham, former Russia director at the National Security Council and a very leading figure in the Russia debate. He makes this point in a book he published last year called Getting Russia Right. So there are people out there who see it in these sort of kind of Kissingerian terms. The big problem is China, get all the allies together we can against China and split Russia from China. That would be good. I don't think that's desirable or possible. But I do think that if we can't deal with Russia, which is actually quite a small country in economic terms, and not that effective a country in military terms, it has an old-fashioned military and a weak economy. And if we can't beat Russia with Ukraine on our side, what chance do we have of standing up to China over Taiwan, where the geography is much less favorable and the correlation of forces is also much less favorable? China is a really big, strong country with a really modern military, and it's getting more modern all the time. So our best bet of dealing with China is a very strong alliance and very strong credibility. China thinks, well, the West is pretty united and pretty strong, and we better not try our luck because we might lose. I don't think China thinks that now. And the reason they don't think that now is because we've shown that we are not that strong, we're not united, and we can't even stand up to Russia over Ukraine.
Do you worry about the results of election in USA and the influence of these results for security in Europe?
I'm worried about the election result, but I'm more worried really about the way that America's going before the election, that we see this paralytic fear of escalation, where the United States is not willing to give Ukraine the weapons it needs. It's not willing to allow other countries to give Ukraine the weapons that Ukraine needs. It's not willing to allow frontline states in NATO to respond decisively against Russian provocations. All through my life, and I'm 62 now, the United States has always been the force that makes NATO stronger. Now the United States is the force that makes NATO weaker, and that's really worrying. Now, I think that President Harris will be less bad than President Trump, probably. But I think that the damage is already done. I think we face a post-American, post-Atlanticist future in Europe. And as I said before, we're not ready for it.
Now we have a very complicated situation on the battlefield. And now we have very complicated situation with the understanding of future, with our partnership with West and with support and many other things. What do you think about the possible scenarios in this Russia's war against Ukraine? How you understand what scenarios are possible right now?
Well, I think that I still hope that Ukraine can prevail on the battlefield, and you've made amazing advances in your use of drones and your ability to chase the Russian Navy into the furthest corner of the Black Sea and to strike deep into Russian territory, hitting Russian logistics and munitions and infrastructure. And you're exacting a huge price from the Russians for every meter of territory that they take. They're losing huge numbers of soldiers. But in the end, if this is a war of attrition, then the bigger army has the advantage. So I worry a lot about that. And I know so many of your best soldiers and best specialists and best pilots have been killed already over this long period where you didn't have the weapons that you need. So I'm worried about the balance of forces on the battlefield. I think that if we get President Trump, I think he wants a Nobel Peace Prize very badly. And I think he'll put a lot of effort into trying to get a kind of theatrical peace summit between President Zelensky and Putin, and try and get a deal that at least sticks for a few months. And he will do that maybe with a mixture of threats to Putin and threats to Zelensky. We don't know, but he wants to be there, I suspect, in Istanbul, with a big smile, saying, "I fixed this." And he then wants to go to the European capitals, to Paris and Berlin, and say, "Look, you failed, I succeeded." And then he will hope to collect his peace prize. And of course, I don't think this deal will stick. I think Putin will not be satisfied just to have, if the fighting stops on the current line of control, that's a big victory for Putin in the end, and he'll come back for more. And Ukraine, if it's arm twisted into accepting this sort of truce or armistice, will be in a terrible state with a lot of economic damage and huge resentment and political, social, economic, demographic, and other strains. So I don't regard this as a desirable outcome at all, but it may be what Trump will try to do. And then the fighting may stop for a year or 18 months, but then it will start again, and we'll be in a much worse position than we were beforehand.
Mr. Lucas, and the last question. Who can stop Putin?
We know what to do. We just don't have the willingness to do it. So what we should do is to confiscate the Russian assets, give them to you. We should give you all the money that you need to fight the war properly. We should give you the weapons you need to fight the war properly. And we should apply sanctions to not just to Russia, but to the Russian enablers and to any Chinese or other foreign company that's helping. So we could do this. We are much bigger and stronger than Russia in the end. The combined West has a GDP of about 40 trillion, and Russia's GDP, depending on how you calculate it, is about 4 trillion, probably a bit less. So we are 10 times bigger than Russia. This is not a conflict of means, as it would be if we were fighting China. This is a conflict about willpower and organization. And Russia is winning, not really because it's strong. It's bigger and stronger than Ukraine, but it's not bigger and stronger than the West. It's winning because Putin bet right. Putin bet that we did not have the willpower and the stamina to keep going. And I thought he was wrong. I thought we were going to support you guys big time. But I'm afraid I was wrong, and looks like Putin was right. The West got bored. The West got scared. And you are paying a horrible price for this. It's not too late to turn it round, and I spend all my time campaigning and trying to get more Westerners to realize what's going on. But at the moment, I'm afraid things do look pretty bleak.
Thank you so much for interview and for great support for Ukraine. Thank you so much, Mr. Lucas.
Well, thank you for your excellent questions.
Thank you. Edward Lucas was our guest today. Stay with us.